Thank you, Mr. Rubin. I would now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I have a few questions for everybody. We only have 5 minutes, so I'll try to be as quick as possible and would just ask for as brief of answer as possible as well. Mr. Rubin, I'm going to start with you. AI and cyber criminals, are they using AI to deploy ransomware attacks?
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is a threat that we're watching very closely at Palo Alto Networks. From a threat intelligence standpoint, we're also doing testing in our own labs to try to recreate some of the potential capabilities. At this point, we're not seeing any new or novel attack techniques generated by AI.
Do we have defenses, or what kind of defenses do we have against AI-powered attacks?
Right. We have the ability to use AI to our benefit to help protect organizations. And that's absolutely what we're doing at Palo Alto Networks, is to create capability that leverages AI to protect.
For our defenses.
And
then I apologize, I want to run through because I want to ask everybody a few questions. But the Atlanta Fed published an article earlier this year saying there was a 144% increase in ransomware from 20 to 21. That's massive. Is this across any specific sector? Is it government, private, large or small, certain industries? Or is it spread evenly throughout?
Yeah, from our data and from our threat intelligence, from the incident response work we do, we see these primarily as crimes of opportunity, where the threat actors are leveraging automated scanning capability to find vulnerabilities and then attack those organizations that are vulnerable.
And then, Mr. Schneider, in this same report, they said that their average ransom payment, I could not believe this, was almost $5 million. And given that the concentration of some of these attackers are in hostile nations, is it safe to assume that some of this money might be used by criminal enterprises, or to line the pockets of our adversaries?
Well, I think all of it is being used by criminal enterprises, and it is, funding and further fueling additional ransomware investments in AI and other technologies to exacerbate
What country is the worst? Which one of our adversaries is the absolute leading the world in these kinds of ransom attacks?
I mean, from the research I've seen, we're generally Russia is where the majority of is a safe haven and a lot of ransomware actors there.
Yep, thank you. And then I have a few questions for Dr. Gosh and Dr. Leffler that I'll just kind of ask them evenly if you could both respond. But, in some cases, ransom is paid, some it's not. But just if you all can sort of generally say, it's not just the ransom fee, if it was paid, that would be the cost of this. There's a much larger cost to an organization, a school or a hospital. What do you guys estimate cost when this attack happened, cost the school and or the hospital?
I would say from our experience, it was very similar to what was shared from the hospital side, in that we had to replace almost everything, upwards of potentially $3, $4, $5 million.
Dr. Leffler.
For UVM Medical Center, it was $65 million in cost.
Yeah, and for $3 to $5 million for a school, sometimes that's a school's budget. I mean,
Right.
Depending on the size of the educational, if it's a local school, et cetera. Do you feel that now that what you've seen and experienced, that you've learned from it, and what kind of steps have you taken that you think other people should be aware of, that they should be doing right now to help protect their organization or institution?
I'm a physician, not an IT expert, but I do understand that we've put things in place since that attack happened. When the bad actors got into our system, they were able to move around at will inside the system. We've added a lot of steps to sub-segment our system into pieces and to make it harder for our administrators to make changes. We've added multi-factor authentication to our administrators we didn't have before, and I've been assured that'll make it much harder when they get in again. We assume it's going to happen again. There's so many people trying.
Dr. Gosh.
We have done similar. We are using AI to monitor all of our email protection systems. We're also using multi-factor authentication. We've moved to immutable backups and a lot of technologies that we did not have before. Everything is cloud-based and provides that extra layer of protection, extra password pieces, and other components that had been told. And EDR is one of the big pieces, the endpoint protection and recovery. So we've added those at a high cost, and that is always a concern as we look at school budgets in terms of maintaining it, but we were able to upgrade to what is needed to combat it.
And how long did that take?
We're still working on some of those initiatives now. It took us a full year to get all of our systems back online And we continue to make improvements by adding things like port security within our network and additional security measures on the back end on the infrastructure. But
Thank you so much. And I yield back. I yield to my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair, and I want to welcome Mr. Schneider in particular, who is my neighbor in Mantua and Fairfax County. We live in the same neighborhood, so welcome. And speaking of Mr. Schneider, I began my opening statement by noting that should the government shut down, as it almost certainly is going to on Saturday, 80% of the employees of CISA will be furloughed. What could go wrong with that?
Well, certainly CISA has an extremely significant role for the nation for cybersecurity, both in working with critical infrastructure, but also for their preparation efforts, but also on being able to get alerts and information along those lines out. I don't know which 20% of CISA is going to be retained and what functions. I would hope that they're going to continue to be able to do the operational pieces and put out alerts as they see emerging threats start to evolve.
But I guess we'd both agree 20% can't really handle what 100% normally handle. Something's going to give. And at the very least, there's a risk.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of our mission. Thank you. Dr. Loeffler, I was really struck by the story of the hospital in Vermont, and I had images. I've done a lot of, when we were doing healthcare, I did a lot of tours of health centers and hospitals, and I had in my mind like a dialysis unit where you have many, many patients in the round, and you have sort of a central computer screen monitoring their progress. Likewise, in oncology units, same thing with chemo. And so I was particularly thinking, well, those patients and those units are particularly vulnerable if you shut that down in a ransomware attack, because you've got 20 or 30 patients at a time often, either on dialysis or on chemotherapy. Was your hospital affected with respect to those patients?
So we kept both those units open because those patients needed to stay alive. So dialysis obviously is, people are life dependent on dialysis. We added staff is what we did. We switched to paper. We added more staff members.
So, but it was, the ransomware did affect.
It did affect them.
It did affect them.
It affected every single part of our function, everything that we do.
Unbelievable. I think that's really important because in addition to the story of schools, and my school system also was attacked, but now we're talking life and death. And the criticality of a hospital can't be overstated, and the vulnerability of hospitals. You said something really profound. I'm not a tech expert, I'm a doctor. And we can't expect everybody in their field of endeavor to be tech experts. And yet, that's the vulnerability. And it affects directly your ability to perform your functions and to serve your clients, your patients. So, Mr. Rubin, I was struck by the fact that you used the term, we're trying to create a new paradigm. And what strikes me about ransomware is everything about our response is reactionary. The paradigm is entirely defensive. Either you do or you don't pay the ransom, and then after the fact, we try to shore up and buttress our assets and our resources to prevent it from recurring. It seems to me if we're going to have a new paradigm, it's got to be a lot more proactive and preemptive rather than reactive. I give you the opportunity to comment on that.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. I completely agree with you. We need to move the focus into taking steps ahead of time, sort of in peacetime, so to speak. And organizations, public and private, need to invest in their cybersecurity posture, in their awareness, and in their essentially defenses to take steps ahead of time. Absolutely.
To what extent would you say that the vulnerability today often reflects, because Dr. Gosh put her finger on it and really resonates with me after the pandemic experience, that an awful lot, especially at state and local levels, we're just not investing in the IT platforms to keep them robust and cyber secure. To what extent do you think that's a big part of the problem?
I do think that that's a big part of the problem. Investing in cybersecurity is a exercise in economics. It's the allocation of scarce resources, and we heard about operating budgets. And so there's always cost-benefit decisions being made about where to put money, and sometimes investing in a cybersecurity resource or tool might mean something else goes unfunded. And so it is hard for state and local organizations. So that's why I think programs like the state and local cybersecurity grant program are a phenomenal resource for state and local entities to avail of to try and get some more resources to help themselves out there.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think it's an overlooked part of the vulnerability spectrum. And we saw that reflected in pandemic. Because take unemployment insurance. Vulnerable, 50 different systems, not one. And, lots of vulnerabilities. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I would now like to recognize Mr. Fallon from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Schneider, when there is a government shutdown, just to clear something up, it's up to the administration, is it not, to use exemptions for folks to come into work?
Yes, there are several exemptions allowed.
Like the Anti-Deficiency Act, there's exemptions for authorized by law to protect human life or protection of property?
Correct.
Okay. So you wouldn't have to furlough 80% of CISA. You could have all of them come into work if you so chose.
I mean, I don't know what decisions CISA is making about who
But
they
it's
are.
it's up to the administration.
But it's up to the administration to.
So we could have everybody come into work. Okay, just wanted to just point that out. And as far as the shutdown goes, as far as, well, we'll save that for a close. Dr. Gosh, thank you for making the trip all the way from Texas, Lone Star State. Your school was hit with the ransomware attack. And can you just describe, did you pay the ransom?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And how much you had to pay?
$547,000 was the final amount.
Yeah. And I think you touched upon this with Chairman Mace, but what were your best and greatest takeaways from the experience as far as preventing it from happening again?
Our best and greatest takeaways is that it isn't a matter of if you're going to be hit by some attack. It's going to be your ability to mitigate and to defend and to recover quickly. In our situation, one of the things that stuck out for us was the need to continually maintain the upgrade and to make sure that the system's on the back end and be able to promote that information to other school district leaders, because in similar situations, I am supposed to be the tech expert in this, but in many cases, the leaders of the school districts are not the tech experts. And so making sure that that message is heard and how important it is to be proactive in the process and to put in multiple ways in which to monitor and to actually utilize. I know AI can be seen as the danger in terms of ransomware, but at the same time, it can also provide so much additional support for identifying a potential threat. Because there are simply not enough man hours in the day, and there's not enough people to look at all the code that's coming in.
Mr. Schneider, just let's say, on average, 6 years ago, if a medium-sized company was hit with an attack, what was the usual asking price? What was the ransom?
So I was in government at the time. I'm not sure I have a great number, but the numbers have certainly increased.
I think Mr. Rubin's going to help us out. Mr. Rubin, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've seen the numbers grow almost exponentially year over year. So I think you said 5 or 6 years ago, it was in the low six figures, if breaking $100,000. And the data varies, but right now, our average from our data was over $650,000 on average.
And that's consistent with what when we got the idea after the Colonial Pipeline and JPS. And then when we were appointed to the subcommittee chairs, got the idea to have this committee hearing, I reached out to some business people I know in Texas, and I found it very interesting that the average ask, it seems, in that neighborhood was about that 50 grand range years ago, and now it's 10 times that, 12 times that. And that's frightening. And then a lot of people, we say, oh, it's X amount of attacks. We don't know really how many, because there's so many folks that pay and are embarrassed that they paid. Or in a case, a friend of mine, who will remain nameless because I don't want him to be a continued target, he got hit, but he had a backup system that was good enough to where he didn't have to pay, and he just rolled into that. And then they just worked on, basically securing the wall, if you will, moving forward. Dr. Loeffler, University of Vermont Medical Center was hit in 2020, is that correct? Yes. Did you all pay the ransom?
We did not pay the ransom. We had a good backup.
But you said the good backup, but it still cost you $65 million?
$65 million.
And where was that most of
It
that
was
loss?
in cleaning and rebooting the system. It was in care that was deferred. It was in extra staff to care for the patients that we cared for. It was across the board.
Well, being originally from Massachusetts, right down Route 7, I feel for you, go Vermont. Mr. Snyder, we've heard from Dr. Leffler, and how about the impacts had with ransomware attack? I mean, $65 million. Can you explain how cyber attacks on critical infrastructure like the one we had with the Colonial Pipeline in 2021 can affect industries and communities beyond what the victimized operation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Certainly Colonial Pipelines is a great example where the pipeline was shut down. I think by all reporting, it was not actually impacted by the ransomware, but they had to shut it down out of an abundance of caution. And then the ripple effect on the entire East Coast, if you were trying to get any fuel, you could not. There were long lines, certainly at gas stations, and that just has a trickle-down effect on, or a, exponential impact or broader impact on the economy writ large.
My time has expired. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Congresswoman Brown from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In March of this year, the Biden-Harris administration released the National Cybersecurity Strategy, a first-of-its-kind effort to combat ransomware attacks. This comprehensive government effort prioritizes the protection of our nation's economy, infrastructure, national security, and public health. The administration's sophisticated strategy addresses long-term solutions to cybersecurity challenges, including the need for a workforce prepared to deal with these 21st century issues like complex, elaborate, and long-running ransomware threats. The next generation of our workforce, those who are in college, trade schools, or newly re-entering the workforce, are often our first line of defense against cyber attacks. In today's integrated economy, all sectors have critical technology components which are vulnerable to ransomware. That is why a prepared workforce is essential to our national response. So, Mr. Rubin, in what ways has the Biden-Harris administration national cybersecurity strategy expanded educational programs to diversify, grow, and equip the cybersecurity workforce?
Thank you, Congresswoman. We applaud the new cybersecurity strategy. There's much in there that really aligns with our vision for how to keep organizations safe. Enhanced visibility, focusing on zero trust, talking about preparedness and IR plans. But with respect to training and educating individuals, there's also a lot there as well. Something that Palo Alto Networks supports as well. We have a program that we call the Cybersecurity Academy that provides free curriculum to middle school through college students to help train and bring up the workforce of the future.
Thank you for that. Now, when conducting new hiring initiatives promoted by the Biden-Harris administration, it is important to highlight the current demographic disparities in the cyber workforce this plan rightly seeks to address. A 2021 report from the Aspen Institute found only 4% of cybersecurity workers identify as Hispanic, 9% as Black, and 24% as women. Mr. Rubin, how can we incentivize hiring a more diverse cyber workforce, and what best practices have you seen to recruit tech talent from communities which are currently underrepresented?
Thank you again, Congresswoman. I think one of Palo Alto Network's core values is inclusion, and we work hard to make sure that we do have diversity in the workforce. And so I think the first step is awareness and being conscious of this as something that's important, and that we all do better when we have people from different backgrounds and different perspectives. Another program that Palo Alto Networks has is recruiting college graduates into a program we call the Unit 42 Academy. They're college graduates that join our workforce, and I'm proud to say that this current class is actually 80% female, but that includes broad diversity as well.
Thank you for that. Additionally, as a member of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, I am committed to working with our international partners to protect the United States from malicious foreign cyber attacks. It is extremely disturbing. We have terrorist groups as well as nations like Russia, North Korea, and China working to disrupt our cyber systems and our strategic alliances in the West. So, Mr. Rubin or Mr. Schneider, in what ways can the United States work more closely with our international partners to combat the threat of ransomware attacks and other cybersecurity challenges? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the question, ma'am. I think to your point, we have to have this as an international, collaboration in order to put an amount of pressure on ransomware actors and on the nation states from which they're operating. And there's a variety of tools that can be used for that, whether they're diplomatic tools, but we're going to have to work together in order to make any real progress on this area.
Thank you. Mr. Rubin?
I agree. I think that I would put them in the categories of disruption and deterrence. On the disruption side, it's leveraging that diplomatic pressure, using carrots and sticks, where we can influence law enforcement action and takedowns. And we have seen some of that more recently, but I think there's a long way to go.
And thank you very much. Clearly, the President's comprehensive cybersecurity plan, which involves everything from an expanded and better trained workforce to cooperation with our international partners, is already paying off. I'm ready to work in a bipartisan manner to strengthen and support the President's initiative. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I would now call on my colleague from Tennessee, Congressman Burchett. Don't screw it up.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I'll try not.